So think about this for a second. When you walk into a local clinic or, a local bank branch, who is actually keeping your personal data safe?
Right. It's something we almost never think about.
Exactly, because the logo on the door,
Hmm.
that belongs to a giant corporate entity headquartered like 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
But operationally, the person typing your sensitive medical history into a computer is sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, and that massive gap between the corporate headquarters and the local reality, that's honestly one of the biggest blind spots in privacy today.
It really is. You hand over your ID, your financial history, your medical records,
Yeah.
and legally, the entity responsible is some faceless board of directors. But the actual on-the-ground safety of your digital identity, that completely comes down to the daily habits of the branch manager sitting across the desk from you.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
Truly. So today, we are taking a deep dive into a brand new framework out of India. Specifically, we're looking at an excerpt in a playbook from DGPSI Bank regarding the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, 2023. I'll just call it the DPDPA to save some breath.
Good cold call.
This framework introduces a concept called the aggregated data fiduciary, and it's basically trying to finally fix that dangerous disconnect between centralized legal liability and, well, the decentralized, messy operational reality. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and it is a critical disconnect to examine because we all sort of operate under this illusion, right? We have this expectation that because a company has a towering glass headquarters and like a 50-page global privacy policy on their website, our data is being guarded by an impenetrable central fortress.
Right, like there's a dragon guarding a server somewhere.
Exactly. But the reality of daily operations is far more distributed. So to understand how this new DGPSI Bank framework attempts to solve the problem, we really have to start with how the DPDPA fundamentally views accountability. The law identifies something called the data fiduciary, and this is the specific legal entity that determines both the purpose and the means of processing your personal data.
So if I walk down the street,
Right.
right, and I open a checking account with a massive national bank, the law looks at that corporate entity and says, you are the data fiduciary. You are entirely responsible.
Yes. Legally, the position is absolute. The bank is a registered corporate entity, therefore the bank with a capital B is the data fiduciary.
Right.
The individual branches you walk into, they're merely operational units. They don't have their own board of directors. They aren't separate legal persons. Consequently, the branches are not independently recognized as data fiduciaries under the law.
So the legal liability rests entirely on the shoulders of the headquarters.
Completely.
And I mean, that makes perfect sense for a legal textbook. You want one throat to choke if something goes wrong. But paper doesn't really reflect how a sprawling multi-state business actually runs.
No, not at all.
You walk into a local branch and they are doing a whole lot more than just scanning documents and blindly forwarding them to a central server.
What's fascinating here is the contrast between the illusion created by modern technology and the reality of daily operations. The illusion of centralized control is really driven by modern tech. Modern banks operate on sophisticated core banking systems, or CBS.
Right, the big mainframes.
Exactly. And this technology gives the impression, both to the consumer and often to the regulators, honestly, that all customer information is centrally managed in some massive, highly secured data vault at the head office.
And from a consumer standpoint, we feel that centralization every day. Like the whole industry has moved to this concept of anywhere banking.
Right.
If I travel across the country, I lose my debit card and I walk into a branch 3 states away, they can pull up my account instantly. I'm not just a customer of my hometown branch anymore. I am a customer of the entire banking network.
Technologically, yes, the storage is centralized. The industry has indeed shifted to where you are a customer of the bank as a whole, with perhaps a nominal parent branch recognized just for, basic documentation purposes.
Yeah.
But the critical flaw in this centralized compliance thinking is assuming that storage equals processing. Just because your data is ultimately stored at the head office does not mean that the actual day-to-day processing of your personal data happens only in that central vault.
It feels a lot like an octopus.
An octopus.
Yeah, like the law is only looking at the head, holding the brain completely responsible for whatever happens, but it's the tentacles, the local branches, that are actually out there navigating the ocean, interacting with the environment, and making daily contact with the customers.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Like the head might be digesting the food, but the tentacles are doing all the messy, on-the-ground work of actually acquiring it.
That's spot on. And expanding on that biology, an octopus actually has localized nerve clusters in its tentacles that make decisions entirely independently of the central brain.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And that is exactly what happens in a branch network. Let's look at what those corporate tentacles are actually doing. The collection of personal data almost always originates at the branch level, long before it ever gets safely onboarded onto the enterprise servers.
Because I'm physically walking in there.
Exactly. The process of gathering consent, that happens at the branch. Initial customer grievances, dispute resolutions, all handled at the branch.
So even if the final legally binding contract I sign belongs to the corporate headquarters, the physical and digital handling of my highly sensitive financial information is happening right there in my neighborhood, subject to the local environment.
Think about the life cycle of securing a property loan. The overarching risk models and interest rates might be dictated by the central office, but the physical loan assets are managed at the branch level.
Right.
Highly sensitive documents, tax returns, property deeds, identity cards, they're physically collected across a desk. They are verified by a local employee, digitized on a local scanner, and temporarily stored through branch-level operations.
So for you, the customer, the branch manager, is the face of the bank.
Precisely. The branch is making real-time decisions about how your documentation is handled and processed before it ever reaches the central system.
But wait, if all this local branch data eventually just gets uploaded to the enterprise servers anyway, why is the local branch such a big risk? I mean, isn't the head office still in control? If the central corporate office has the budget to build a billion-dollar core banking system, why are local branches even allowed to touch the data independently?
You would think they wouldn't be.
Right. We're living in a cloud-first world. Shouldn't the local desk just be a dumb terminal?
It seems logical, but the push for speed and customer experience has actually driven technology in the opposite direction. Branches aren't just paper pushers anymore. They are deploying complex, decentralized technologies right at the edge of the network. They aren't just logging into a single central mainframe.
Really? Like what?
Well, the source material details how branches are independently utilizing a massive array of localized tools to do their jobs faster.
I assume this isn't just branch managers saving customer data on local Excel spreadsheets, right? The source mentions edge tech and AI. How are local branches deploying these kinds of advanced systems without the head office strictly controlling every keystroke?
Let's look at a very specific mechanism. OCR, or optical character recognition, which is heavily used for Know Your Customer, or KYC, onboarding.
Okay.
You walk into a branch and hand over your driver's license. The branch employee doesn't mail that physical card to headquarters.
No, they scan it.
Right. They scan it or take a photo with a tablet, but the software extracting the text from that image is often a localized tool, maybe an AI-assisted edge application running on the local device, or a third-party vendor's localized cloud environment.
Oh, wow.
For the seconds or minutes that software is processing the image to extract your name and address, your data is completely outside the central bank's encrypted vault.
So in that 5-second gap, the data is highly vulnerable. The head office might have the best firewalls on earth, but if the local branch's tablet is compromised, or the local OCR software caches the image insecurely, the data is leaked before it ever even reaches the fortress.
Exactly. And the technological fragmentation goes much deeper than just OCR. The source highlights local fraud detection systems, independent loan scoring models, localized analytics platforms, and various cloud-based business applications that branch managers might utilize just to handle their local customer service queues or manage local marketing campaigns.
Man, that makes the technology footprint terrifying from a compliance standpoint.
It really does.
But technology is only half the battle, right?
Yeah.
What about the human element? A branch isn't an island. They have to interact with the local business community.
The human element, specifically the localized vendor web, is arguably a much larger privacy risk than the technology. Branches do not operate in a vacuum. They interact with numerous third-party service providers on a daily basis.
Who are we talking about here?
We are talking about local recovery agencies, valuation agencies for property loans, local legal firms, local marketing agencies, document digitization vendors, and even local IT support contractors.
So the tentacle isn't just grabbing my data. It's actively handing my data off to other local fish in the sea.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's walk through how that actually happens. If I default on a loan, headquarters doesn't send a corporate lawyer from 1,000 miles away, right?
Right. Headquarters flags the default in the central system, but the actual recovery process is operationalized locally. The branch manager will engage a local legal firm to draft notices or hire a local recovery agency to physically visit the property.
Okay.
To do that, the branch has to transmit your personal data, your name, address, loan amount, financial history to those local third parties.
How are they transmitting it? I'm guessing it's not always through some highly secure, centrally audited portal.
Often it's a PDF sent over standard email. Sometimes it's a printed dossier literally handed over in a meeting.
You're joking.
I wish I was. While corporate policies at headquarters might require all vendors to sign strict non-disclosure agreements, the day-to-day operational decisions of what specific data points are sent, how they are sent, and whether that local recovery agency is actually deleting the data after the job is done, those realities are dictated entirely at the branch level.
Wow.
The head office has zero real-time visibility into the cybersecurity practices of a three-person legal firm operating down the street from the branch.
This sounds like an absolute governance nightmare. If a local branch employee accidentally emails an unencrypted PDF of my financial records to the wrong local vendor, or if that local valuation agency gets hacked and leaks my property details, the entire bank is legally liable.
Yes.
The law comes after the head office. The regulators impose the massive fines on the corporate board. But the failure happened hundreds of miles away, entirely out of sight of the bank's central data protection officer.
That is the precise governance gap the DGPSI bank framework is highlighting. Traditional compliance models assume that privacy governance can be centralized. The old mindset is, you write an ironclad privacy policy at HQ, you appoint a highly qualified central data protection officer, you secure the central servers, and you're compliant. But in practice, under a rigorous law like the DPDPA, compliance succeeds or fails at the operational edge. The legal accountability rests at the center, but the operational processing is wildly distributed.
We have a national law targeting the head of the octopus, but all the daily practical risk is in the tentacles.
Exactly.
And rewriting a massive national law like the DPDPA to legally recognize every single one of a bank's 5,000 local branches as individual data fiduciaries. That just isn't going to happen. It would paralyze the legal system.
It's completely unfeasible.
So how do massive, sprawling businesses adapt to this reality? Because rewriting the law isn't an option. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
This brings us to the core solution presented in the source material, the aggregated data fiduciary.
The aggregated data fiduciary is essentially a corporate governance solution applied to a strict legal problem. To bridge the gap between central liability and local operations, the DGPSI bank proposal suggests a structural overlay.
Okay, how does that work?
The bank as a whole remains the aggregated data fiduciary, while every single branch is internally designated as an operational data fiduciary.
Let's make sure we are incredibly clear on the mechanics of this for the listener. Adopting this framework doesn't change the actual law, does it? The regulators are still going to knock on the headquarters door if my data gets leaked by a local vendor.
The legal liability does not shift. This is purely an internal governance and operational framework. It does not legally redefine the statutory concept of a data fiduciary under the DPDPA.
Got it.
The bank remains the sole legal entity on the hook. However, for internal governance, audit, and operational purposes, accountability is cascaded down to the level where the processing decisions are actually implemented.
The source also explicitly mentions that under this framework, both the central bank and the local branch would be considered significant data fiduciaries. The word significant carries a lot of weight in privacy legislation. Why is that designation crucial here?
The significant designation is tied directly to the nature and volume of the data being handled. Given the high sensitivity of financial information, the sheer volume of individuals processed, and the potential risk to consumers if the data is breached, the processing carries the highest possible regulatory weight.
That makes sense.
By treating the branch internally as a significant operational data fiduciary, the corporation is mandating that the local branch must adhere to the exact same stringent security, auditing, and compliance protocols as the central headquarters. The branch cannot just claim they are a small local office, they have to operate with enterprise-grade data hygiene.
It reminds me of how giant manufacturing conglomerates handle physical safety. Yeah, a corporation like an auto manufacturer has one central board of directors holding the legal liability for occupational health and safety. But the board isn't walking the floor of a factory in another country checking if welders are wearing safety goggles.
Right.
Every single factory or regional plant has managers who are strictly responsible for operational compliance on the ground.
Mm.
The overarching policy is set at the top, but the enforcement is aggressively localized.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that parallel to occupational safety is incredibly accurate. Enterprise-wide legal responsibility remains centralized, but the actual accountability for the DPDPA needs to flow from the boardroom directly down to the branch floor.
Which brings us to the individual actually running the branch. Since the branch manager is the face of the bank for you, the listener, this framework essentially hands them a massive new responsibility. The source suggests the branch manager should now function as the branch privacy officer or branch data protection coordinator.
Yes, unless the scale of the branch requires appointing a dedicated officer for that role, and it is vital to distinguish this operational role from the statutory data protection officer, or DPO, appointed by the bank at headquarters.
Right, because the central DPO is the one dealing with the government regulators, setting the overarching enterprise policies, and basically taking the legal heat. So what does a branch privacy officer actually do on a random Tuesday afternoon? How does their day-to-day job change under this framework?
Well, their day shifts from purely driving sales and customer service to actively managing data hygiene. On a Tuesday afternoon, a branch privacy officer might be auditing the data destruction logs of that local valuation agent we talked about.
Okay.
They are verifying that the local legal firm actually deleted the files for a closed recovery case. They are checking physical filing cabinets to ensure clean desk policies are enforced. They are making sure that the local marketing campaign they just launched collected explicit, documented consent from the community members, and that this consent is logged in a way the central office can verify.
So they're the ones keeping the receipts.
Exactly. They maintain the local records and provide the actual physical evidence of compliance happening on the ground.
This creates a highly practical governance hierarchy. The central brain knows exactly what the tentacles are doing because the tentacles are now required to keep their own meticulous ledgers. But if banks actually start adopting this distributed governance model, it forces a massive ripple effect across the entire compliance industry.
Oh, absolutely.
The watchdogs, the regulators, the external auditors, they have to completely change how they evaluate a company. So if I am an independent data auditor, my job just got significantly harder, right? I can't just fly to headquarters, sit in a plush boardroom, and review a PDF of their privacy policies anymore.
An audit limited to head office policies is effectively useless under this operational reality. The concept of an aggregated data fiduciary demands a radical shift in auditing practices. If an auditor wants to provide any meaningful assurance regarding actual day-to-day compliance with the DPDPA, they cannot rely on centralized attestations.
So the auditors actually have to get in their cars, drive out to the branches, and start turning over rocks at the operational edge.
They have to get their hands dirty. They have to evaluate the physical and digital realities at the local level. An auditor needs to walk into a branch and evaluate branch-level consent management in real time. How does the teller actually ask for consent when a customer sits down?
Right.
They need to look at local vendor governance, asking the branch privacy officer to produce the data flow map for their local recovery agents.
They have to audit those local AI and OCR deployment practices too. Like, they need to see exactly what happens during that 5-second gap when an ID is scanned.
Furthermore, they must assess the local employee awareness. Do the tellers know the data retention protocols? Are data breach incidents at the branch level being reported up the chain to the central DPO immediately? Or are they being swept under the rug locally?
Which happens all the time.
Right. Auditors have to seek out the physical and digital evidence supporting compliance at the edge of the network. Only by validating the operational data fiduciaries can they provide credible assurance that the aggregated data fiduciary of the bank is actually compliant.
That is a fundamental shift in how we approach corporate accountability. And while the source material uses the banking sector as its primary illustration because it's so heavily reliant on branch networks, this legal versus operational split exists in almost every major industry.
The structural vulnerability is ubiquitous. Consider large hospital networks. The overarching healthcare conglomerate is the legal data fiduciary, but every individual clinic, local pharmacy, and regional imaging center operates with significant local autonomy regarding patient data.
Retail chains are another massive one. Or, universities with multiple sprawling campuses where each department runs its own local student databases.
Telecommunication operators with thousands of regional service centers. Government departments with district-level administrative offices. The vulnerability even extends deeply into franchise-based business models.
Oh, that's a fascinating point. Every time you buy food at a fast food franchise or sign up for a local gym membership, you are physically interacting with a local small business owner, the franchisee,
Yep.
but the data you provide for their loyalty program might be flowing between their localized systems and the global corporate brand servers.
In all of these scenarios, the legal data fiduciary is technically a single entity, but the operational processing of personal data is widely and sometimes wildly distributed. The aggregated data fiduciary model provides a structured, scalable mechanism for these diverse industries to distribute operational responsibility and oversight without attempting to dilute their centralized legal accountability.
The source notes that this framework is a natural evolution in privacy thought. They contrast it with a previous concept known as the super data fiduciary, which was designed for umbrella organizations that oversee multiple, entirely independent legal entities, like a holding company managing different brands.
Right.
But this is distinctly different. The aggregated data fiduciary recognizes that within a single legal entity, the operational reality is deeply fragmented.
This raises an important question. As organizations increasingly adopt edge computing, localized AI services, and decentralized digital operations, the fragmentation is only going to accelerate. How can any widespread organization survive strict privacy compliance without adopting some form of aggregated, distributed governance?
They can't.
The reality is, they likely can't. A law like the DPDPA establishes the legal baseline for accountability, but it is entirely up to the organizations to engineer the internal governance structures to make that accountability operational on a daily basis.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the complete picture we've mapped out today, it serves as a harsh reality check for both massive corporations and everyday consumers. The legal text provides a clean, theoretical framework for who to blame the data fiduciary. But blaming a corporate headquarters and issuing a regulatory fine after a catastrophic data breach doesn't unleak your personal information. Organizations must build internal operational frameworks like the aggregated data fiduciary to ensure the localized tentacles know exactly what the central brand requires, and more importantly, that those tentacles are constantly monitoring their own environment.
It demands a total cultural shift from viewing data privacy as a legal checkbox managed by lawyers at headquarters to treating it as an operational daily habit practiced at every single customer touchpoint. I'd love to pose a question to you listening to this. What stands out to you about this dynamic between central policy and local reality? Does understanding the mechanics of localized vendors and edge technology change how you view your everyday interactions at local branches?
It fundamentally changes the perspective for me. We started this deep dive by asking who was actually responsible for your data when you walk into a local clinic or bank branch. For years, we've implicitly trusted the giant corporate logos on the building.
We all have.
But as organizations rapidly adopt edge AI, decentralized cloud services, and rely heavily on hyperlocal vendors, the era of relying on a single centralized data guardian in a glass tower might be entirely dead. Moving forward, you have to wonder, will the true safety of your digital identity depend less on a corporate board's grand privacy policy and significantly more on the tech savviness, the vigilance, and the daily habits of a mid-level manager sitting at your local branch? Keep that in mind the next time you hand your ID across the desk.